Welcome to the Comfortable in Chaos Podcast. Strangle your demons and let's go.
Y'all need Jesus!
But February made me shiver with every paper I'd deliver. Bad news on the doorstep. I couldn't take one more step. I can't remember if I cried when I read about his widowed bride. Something touched me deep inside the day the music died. So bye-bye, Miss American Pie. Drove my Chevy to the levee, but the levee was dry. And them good old boys were drinking whiskey and rye, singing, "This will be the day that I die. This will be the day that I die." Welcome to the Comfortable in Chaos Podcast. I am your host, Eric Hellberg, and you know we're like Einstein over here, man. We have no special talents. We're just passionately curious about all things pertaining to men. How in the hell did we get here, and where is it that we want to go? We're coming off an episode, men, from yesterday, and we called it The Pale Horse. It had spiritual connotations, and that harkens me back, I cannot remember the date, when President Trump at that time said, "Sometimes we need help from the boss," and he gestured up above himself. He looked around, he says, "Yeah, that's right. Sometimes we have to go to the boss for help. Oftentimes we don't want to have to say it, but it's all right. And I will say it. We need help." He looked around some more. Of course, there was some raucous applause. And then he told a story of how someone had recently come up to him and said, "Did you know, President Trump, you're the most famous person in the world?" He's like, no. And actually, President Trump, belying his own manly, fleshly nature, you could tell he was humbled in talking about this. And when you truly have an inkling or an understanding of the Christ, there is a humility that will come upon your spirit and your soul. And you cannot be totally assured. That is the fear and trembling, the utter awe. But what did Donald Trump say? He said, "No, I'm not the most famous person in the world. That is Jesus Christ." Now, why would I bring this up? Because my memory was jogged when I said that no traveling world leader of ours, more specifically, my implications were guys doing our diplomatic envoys. Think of your corrupt rats like Blinken, or Kamala, or Joe. They are not going to decry what just happened in Gay Paris. But I later heard, since I don't watch mainstream news nor Fox, they bore me, frankly, and I know most of it is disinformation. And or if Fox touches upon it, it is just the briefest snippet. It's just the froth that you see coming in along the shore. But when you're looking at a wave, there is so much more underneath. So why is this significant? It is significant because in Philippians 1:18, and of course that would have been a letter written to the church at Philippi by Paul, addressing the Philippians, he basically says, no matter how it is done, as long as the name of Christ is proclaimed, in this I will rejoice. Because the Democrats out there and the naysayers will say, well, he said it for false motives. Well, he said it, didn't he? Who of your other vanguards of democratic debauchery, debasement, have you ever heard say the name Jesus Christ and then say it in deference? Instead, the same mainstream media that I just lamented that I don't pay attention to one bit, they are now going to take someone who is generally unliked, in fact, detested, especially by her own people in California, someone who has done nothing other than coddle up and exercise some of the same shenanigans that go on in Gay Paris to get to where she is currently. And they are now going to try to transmute her into godlike status. Take her from something that she is not, virtually nothing, and turn her into deity. So we can now worship her, accept her, and then ultimately get enough votes for her. And you know we do not like loose ends. I reference it oftentimes on the CIC. We don't like loose ends. And so where am I going with this? In that song, American Pie, that surely has significance for many of my listeners. I bet they listen to that song intently. We don't want the music of America to die. We don't want this to be the day that I die. We want our country strong and flourishing again, but without knowing where we are now, we will not know who the actors are and how we need to go about defeating the system that is currently in place. And I would even venture to tell you, when Donald Trump rose up from that gaggle of Secret Service minions, the minions would have done a better job of protecting him, but they were not supposed to. But when he rose up and defiantly raised that fist and said, fight, fight, it was transitional. It's kind of like, and I'll go back, there's people that listen to my show whose history goes back further. But we'll say December 7th, 1941, Pearl Harbor, the country unified and rallied. We move over to November 22nd, 1963, JFK's assassination, much of the same ploys, tactics, everything in place that were actually employed against President Trump, albeit unsuccessfully. Where were you then? The country rallies. We can go to 9/11 and Bush standing on the rubble right there, right? Believe that would have been the day after, possibly 2 days after, because of security. And he basically said, the people, the men who knocked down these towers will be hearing from us very soon. And we can equate what just happened to President Trump as the same, especially when you realize what all he has endured, what all he has had to try to overcome, what all the people that he is choosing to serve have put him through. It is very much akin to Christ. He did the same for us, and it is humbling. It can also be a call to action, somewhat exhilarating at the same time. And we're not prepared to let this country go. We want this country to move forward, but we want it to do so in a much better and honest fashion. So let's take this a bit further, but continue to circle around these thoughts. What you saw in Gay Paris was very much akin to everything in Satan's manual, right? He has no new tactics. We just simply keep falling for the same old tried and true techniques, much akin to like C.S. Lewis's Screw Tape Letters, and he denoted it in there. I mean, what does he play on? Greed, lust, power, self-will over the Lord's will. Really? Let's add this into it. Coerciveness, control, your right of determination as opposed to anyone else's, especially your loved ones or those who you care about around you. And it gets very much like the Russian foreign minister said. Any type of faith or familial structure has been destroyed over here. And it has been done by design. It is also a tried and true satanic technique. How do we know? Well, the story's right there in Genesis, Adam and Eve. Eve was a bit rebellious, and we know what her punishment was for that. And now the modern day feminists are simply going to say, I'm not talking about the feminist with the shaved head, and, she looks kind of like a high school linebacker who has no need for a man whatsoever. I'm talking about the new feminism. And what is the new feminism? The new feminism is you will serve me, you will make me happy, and in fact, the only impediment that I have to being happy is you, sir. So my boy, get off your duff and try harder, which is really ironic because you modern women will submit to a man in authority in your workplace more and better than you will do to your own husbands at home. Why is that? Does it require a dollar amount to be accrued in order for you to submit? Is that the big problem? But that word, submission, it makes you bristle, does it not, ladies? We know we have some lady listeners on this show, but did you know that they are actually more enlightened to a great degree? A little bit more traditional to a great degree? And the ladies are going to say, oh, I will submit if he will submit to all of my needs and wants. Okay, ladies. So you think you can denigrate your man every single day and have him rise above that? That's an interesting concept. All right. Then here is what you do. Here is what you do, you harlots. And it doesn't even have to be an actuality. You don't have to be cavorting around with other men. But in most cases, you probably are. It doesn't even have to be sexual. Just in attention, just in company, just in preoccupation. But you are a harlot. You're a harlot of self. Now, granted, you came from a man. And that is now what you opine and say is patriarchy to denote that fact. Right now, ladies, you are dealing with two generations of men that are so much more genteel, that are so much more effeminate, that are so much more touchy-feely. And why? Why, you have demanded it, but you're still not satisfied. I tell you what we need to do. Keep tearing manhood apart. And let's give you a real patriarchal system. Let's tear them down until you no longer have a country. In fact, park that damn vehicle that was made majority-wise by men. Go sit out on the sidewalk. If you live in the country, go out in your pasture instead of your nice, comfortable dwelling that was made predominantly, and the materials delivered predominantly, and everything that goes into the infrastructure of that house predominantly by men. You go park that car, you go ahead and step out of that house, and you keep tearing the men down. And let's get you a real patriarchy, because these men are no longer going to be here for you. Which one do you want? You want some of the Islamic hordes? Huh? I can just see that right now. You, a nice and compassionate and expressive woman. So you see two Muslim men on the street. You extend your hand, as is the American way. And you're a modern woman, so you know how to do an appropriate greeting, right? You go to shake their hands and they pull their hands back, because that is haram. In Arabic, that means forbidden. But then they genteelly let you know. Now, ma'am, if you're willing to become our sex slave, then we can touch you all we want. Oh, okay. What about some good old systemic regimes from China? Take other parts of the world. Is their patriarchy a little bit more fulfilling for you? Ladies, start submitting and stop submitting to one another. You're all going to end up alone. You are going to regret this now more than ever. In fact, you have been played more by the devil than a man has. And to bring a bit of finality to this concept, and something told me I probably have many a listener that needed to hear that. But we will not stay there. We'll bring a little bit of closure. So the next time you are awakened in your sleep, probably adorned with your night clothes that, yes, probably a gay man, but a man nonetheless, crafted, designed for you. And everywhere you look as your vigilance begins, mixed with your emotions of fear, anxiety, perhaps even terror because you heard a loud noise. And as that thief comes to rob, steal, and kill, and you have let them do that of your womanhood, and you have abjected it onto your mates or the men around you's manhood, unless you need or want something from them. If it is an actual thief that you can see right here in the present that has come to do one of those things at your home, if you're married, or say you're shacked up with your boyfriend, just simply tap them on the shoulder and say, "Don't worry about it, babe. I've got it handled." You don't need them at all, but that's not the case, because we live in a very dangerous world, and men do all the dangerous jobs for the most part, and they will always be needed. And in that respect alone, they are just about good enough. So let's talk about this dangerous world as we move on from here. It looks as if world leaders are now hedging their bets. Donald Trump is a force of nature. Boris Johnson, old yeller Boris. Oh, yeah. Yeah, he's as bad as the current administration that we have right now. And they work hand in hand. We've already, I guess, demonstrated that. I don't know how many times. But old Boris Johnson has now gone to X. Has a picture of him and Donald Trump. However, it's an old picture. But his commentary is amazing. He says Donald Trump has the courage and the bravery to end the war in Ukraine. They're starting to get very, very worried. Now, Boris Johnson, he's the same man who represented NATO and essentially us on behalf of the United States. That would have been 2 months into Putin coming into the special military operation back at the end of 2022, and they all had a meeting in Turkey. All of this could have ended right then and there. And basically Putin cautiously poked, massed a few soldiers at the border, went in with minimalist numbers because he wanted an international solution. Why? Because he had been begging for one since the United States and the Maidan coup put in their puppet regime. And if you don't believe that, pick up the Time magazine cover where Clinton basically said they had installed Yeltsin to accelerate the downfall of Russia. I referenced it. Go find it for yourselves. We do this all over the world in the name of our own self-interest, money, and democracy. So Putin was very patient. He thought he could achieve a resolution diplomatically around the world. And what had happened since 2014 with the new puppet regime we installed, ultimately ending in the vaudeville actor Zelensky, is that people in the Donbass, and where is the Donbass? Just picture down on the Ukrainian coast, towns like Donetsk and Luhansk, towns that wanted to separate, whole populations that wanted to remain part of Russia, but they wouldn't allow it under the new regime. Not only would they not allow it, they forbid the Russian language, and these were ethnically Russian people from their heritage. They would not allow them to worship. And to add one better, they were killing them. Civilians. Primarily children. They like to target public areas, schools, the same things that you now hear that purportedly Russia does. That has not happened, man. The Ukrainians, and more specifically the Nazi faction, there are probably 20% Nazis in Ukraine, but they control everything. And you're going to say, well, my God, we're supporting the Nazis? You damn right we are. Go back to my episodes on Bush. Go back and look into the Union Bank. Yeah, we fought Hitler, but we financed Hitler. You're driving around as fancy autos that used to produce war machine equipment for Hitler. Without our financing, without our funding, there would not have been any Third Reich. And Papa Bush was up to the shithole in that. Go back to my prior episodes. We love Nazis. We trade with Nazis. And Nazis run Ukraine. So yes, Putin was concerned about the expansionist ideology. He was concerned about the massing of weapons that had been going on for years in Ukraine, but he was still being very patient. He pretty much got to the point of no return, but the real point of no return was the killing of his own Russian citizens in the Donbass. And when he finally went in October of 22, a whole-scale slaughter had already begun, and he knew he could wait no longer. But then Zelensky shit his pants. He had promises from the West that, no, Russia won't do that. They will cow to us, and we will have our way in this country. It didn't happen that way. You have a leader over there who actually cares about his people. And so that's what happened. Zelensky went to Turkey begging for a solution. Boris Johnson said, no, sir. It's wartime, baby. We have billions of dollars to make, and we have a consolidation of power to hold on to. So he was not allowed to do that. Okay, who else is changing their tune now that Donald Trump may be coming in? Well, the foreign minister, akin to our Secretary of State of South Korea. South Korea is starting to realize it's been a vassal, meaning a serf state of the United States, and that no longer has any play. They're not getting anywhere. In fact, I have it from a well-informed source, an inside source who now resides in China, that same defense or state minister from South Korea recently met with his counterpart in China on the hush-hush. And we now know it's been made public, although their meeting was private. And boy, is that going to get the boys in Washington. Oh, of course, the ladies too, acting as boys. It's going to get them in an uproar because South Korea is one of our allies. But he just hosted Sergei Lavrov, right? Who's that? Well, he is the counterpart to Anthony Blinken for Russia, but they look diametrically different. One man has a presence. One man has a personality. One man has his own demonstrable force, and when he speaks, people listen. That's the type of men that we need in our government. We don't have that in Blinken or anywhere else. So they had a closed-door meeting. I think they're also hedging their bets. They're starting to see where the next nexus of power actually is. Now, we haven't touched upon the Middle East in some time. There's been so many other things that we've been discussing coming back off of our vacation break. But my God, is it turning up over there? It is getting crazy. Now, we'll see what do we want to call them mainstream, the normal news, the normal outlets? What kind of information will they provide tomorrow? But earlier this evening, we know that Mossad took out Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh. And you're like, what the hell? If you even know who he is. I mean, he's been on TV a little bit. Who he was, if you want to know his exact title for Mr. Haniyeh, was the chairman of the Overseas Political Bureau of the Hamas terror organization. And in the not too distant past, he was the actual governor of Gaza, that which has been obliterated now by the IDF. Where was he? How did this happen? You remember many episodes ago, I told you that Iranian officials were scared out of their damn wits because they didn't know who was going to be off the next. Well, Ishmael was over there for President Masoud Pezeshkian's, probably butchered that, but we can give it one more shot, Pezeshkian's swear-in ceremony today, Tuesday. But they provided him a private residence in which to stay, and Mossad ran an op, killed him dead right then and there in Tehran, of all places. Now, you remember the last time that the IDF targeted sovereign Iranian territory. What happened? Rockets. It wasn't the rockets' red glare, but it was definitely something to sit and stare. Now here we are again. They're basically operating gloves off with impunity, and no one is going to be untouchable. So they have now performed another execution inside of Iran and in Tehran. So think doubleheader in baseball, because the IDF and Mossad have been on a roll. You know who else they killed? Well, we're still on Tuesday. We're still on Tuesday. They also killed Faoud Shukr Saeed Musham, better known as Fuad Shukr. Who was he? That was actually Hezbollah's number 2 man. He was the man responsible for the majority of Hezbollah's most advanced weaponry. Precise guided missiles, cruise missiles, anti-ship missiles, long-range rockets, and unmanned aerial vehicles. And they have been looking for him since October 8th. He was also the guy who recently... Well, first, let me tell you this. What's most interesting about Fuad Shukr is the very fact that he is who we give credit to bombing the Beirut embassy, the Marine embassy, where I think it was 272, right in that number, Marines were killed in Lebanon in 1983. Since that time, from 1983 till present, to his demise today, there has been a $5 million US dollar bounty on his head. But the United States has never brought this man to justice. For what reason, I don't know. But Israel did the job in completing their doubleheader today. And what did he most recently do? This past weekend, he is the guy responsible for the attack on the Majdal Sham soccer field, whereby they launched missiles and totally decimated, mangled, destroyed 9 children's bodies playing soccer. And I knew the shit was really getting stirred then. But they got him. Israel's determined. And let's see where this all leads. Now, this is unconfirmed. Let's wait and see what we learn tomorrow. But I was told from a unnamed U.S. source in the security apparatus that at the same time Ishmael was taken down, done in Iran, that the head of Iran's Revolutionary Guard was also killed. But that is unconfirmed. Let's see what we find out. Boy, oh boy. And then finally, since we are in theater, we're talking all things Middle East. Erdogan, and what is Turkey? A NATO member, is saying that he is going to invade Israel. So will NATO turn on NATO? How will this play out if, in fact, this cauldron totally goes up in smoke? So until next time on the Comfortable in Chaos podcast, I bid you bon voyage, my burgeoning flock.